Well, Susan, we can get started.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll just kick it off. Or Susan, actually, would you like to lead us in prayer to get us started?
I would. Thank you. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather here today. Where two or more are gathered in your name, you are with us, and we feel so blessed by this opportunity. Please, dear Father, bless Andy Parks, and thank you for giving us the gift of his wisdom and insights. And please open our hearts, Lord, for to be able to really embrace the words that we're going to hear tonight and help us to move forward to really be the best version of ourselves that you have created us to be. And we ask this in your Son's name. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Great. All right. Thank you, Susan. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. I think I know most, if not all of you, or I've seen all of you before, but I'll give a quick introduction. So as Susan mentioned, my name is Andy Parks, and my wife, Adele, and I are parishioners at St. John Vianney. We used to live in Kirkland. However, we moved to Edmonds almost about a year ago now. We've been living in Edmonds. Yeah, and my role at Central is I'm a professor in the management department. But before joining Central Washington, I had a long career in the consumer packaged goods industry. So I worked for Pfizer, a company called Diageo, and then Coca-Cola. And I spent about 20 years with the Coca-Cola company. And the presentation that I'm going to share today is actually from some of the content that I use with adult students, and it's from a course called Emotional Intelligence for Professionals. Okay. All right, so I'll explain more about emotional intelligence and how this particular presentation fits into that whole concept. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I do want to say before I share that this is meant to be super interactive. So please chime in, use the chat, stop me along the way if you have questions. We'll also have some breakout discussions as well. So I think we have about 3 to 4 different breakout activities that you'll go in and talk to each other on, okay? All right, so with that being said, we'll go ahead and dive into this, and this should take about 90 minutes. It should be about a 90-minute workshop. All right, can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, all right, so the topic of today, this presentation or this workshop is called Emotional Regulation, Leading from a Position of Insight versus Reaction. Okay, and one of the reasons that I decided to give this presentation in particular is, as you know, there's a lot of change going on within our parish and Catholic community in the Northwest. And so I thought this would be a really good topic to bring up now. This is all about managing our emotional regulation and giving us some tools to work through stressful situations. Okay, so that's what this particular presentation is all about. All right, and just a reminder, we are, light on Finn Hill, but I also like this quote here, or scripture, you are the light of the world, from Matthew 5:14. All right, so let's dive right into it. This is a typical type of conversation that we would see in a business setting or just in any type of interaction. So Erica, who we have on the left, is saying, why can't you get it together and be on time with our orders for a change? And then we have this guy, Jake, who's saying, well, Erica, if you stop overfilling the pipeline so that you can get your big commissions, we might be on time. Okay, so has anyone seen or witnessed this type of dialogue before?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. The words may change, but the tone doesn't. All right, so can anyone just chime in and say, does this look like emotional intelligence based on this little snippet of what you're saying? No? All right, and would anyone like to come off mute and give an answer why? Why don't you think this is emotional intelligence? Based on what you may think emotional intelligence is at this point. Thoughts, anyone?
There's no problem solving, there's no agreement, there's no common goal. There's
Yeah.
simply sniping anger and
Yeah.
animosity.
Yeah, they're
exactly.
attacking each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
blaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well said, everyone. Very well said. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah, there's a lot of blame. There's no intention behind the conversation, as Ron mentioned. They're attacking each other, and they also appear to be triggered, right? Yeah, they're both triggered for different reasons. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, that these types of conversations happen more than we think. Okay, and the intent of this presentation or our workshop is to give us the tools to help approach conversations in a more intentional and regulated way with insight. Okay. So with that being said, let me give you the definition of emotional intelligence. And there's a couple, but this is the one that I use in my courses. So it really is that ability to recognize and understand your emotions, and using that skill, okay, and that awareness to manage yourself and your relationships with others. Okay, so that's the one of the definitions of emotional intelligence. Now, there's 4 different components of emotional intelligence, and they all work together. The first one is self-awareness. The second one is self-management, so that's what we're focusing on today. The third one is social awareness, and the fourth one is relationship management. The 2 that are in blue, I refer to these as self-mastery in the courses that I teach. And then the ones in green, I refer to those as social mastery, okay? But combined, all 4 of those make up emotional intelligence. And these are the 4 components. When we dive a little bit deeper within those 4 components, there's actually 17 competencies that build up emotional intelligence. Okay? And so you can see the ones that are on the screen here. But what we're going to focus on today is the self-management piece, and specifically self-control and transparency will be the competencies that we dive into. Okay? So I just wanted to give the bigger framework of what emotional intelligence is and where we're going to spend our time, at least today. Okay? All right. Now, if you can type in the chat, why do you think emotional intelligence is important? Okay, so whatever comes to your mind, just go ahead and type in the chat. And if you're driving, I saw someone in their car, and you're not able to type in the chat, you can come off mute and just say it as well. So why is EQ important? Okay, all right. And I see April says it improves communication. Donna says connections. Yeah, Debbie says reduces conflict. Yeah, April also says shows empathy. Absolutely. Okay, other thoughts? Yeah, better relationships from Maybeth. Yeah, and Anetta, understanding. Yeah, improves relationship. Excellent, Diana. Yeah, really good, everyone. Okay, and we may have some others that come in, but let me talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and just kind of bigger picture. And all of you are absolutely right. EQ, it is critical for success, not only in the workplace, but also in our personal lives. It's been proven time and time again that our health and our equilibrium, our nervous system, all improve as our levels of emotional intelligence go up. The one that I really hone in on is that when done correctly, it serves as a GPS for our lives. Okay, I will say that this is a lifelong journey. I've been practicing EQ now, or emotional intelligence, for about 15 years, a little over that, and teaching it for 5 years now. And it all begins with us. So it is a very inward journey. Okay. Here's another chart that really speaks to the importance of emotional intelligence. If you look on the right-hand side, 85, I'm going to the far right here, 85% of leadership success or performance excellence for leadership type roles is related to emotional intelligence. 66% of all jobs, performance excellence is driven by emotional intelligence. So if you want to be an effective leader or just effective in your role in general, it does require a healthy dose of emotional intelligence. Okay, so this is some of the business rationale behind why investing in emotional intelligence. And then if we look at the left hand side, another definition, and these are by the two people that actually originally founded or discovered emotional intelligence. So Peter Salovey and John Mayer, both actually were at Yale. But their definition is the ability to monitor one's own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different emotions, to label them appropriately, and to use emotional information to guide our thinking and behavior. Okay? So that's another definition as well. Okay? So with that little setup, our objectives today, or our learning goals, is to understand how to use our emotional vocabulary, understand the difference between feelings and emotions, and probably the biggest part of this is to understand how to manage events that trigger us or that get us upset, okay? And there's a custom model that I'm going to share with you called the ECOR model, or emotional catch, observe, and release, okay? So our journey today, as I mentioned before, is going to begin with self-management. Okay. And here's our agenda on the left. I just kind of went through that, but here's our specific agenda. So I want to first start out with getting us grounded in the definition of insight. I talk a lot about insight. I even said that the title of this presentation is Managing Yourself from a Position of Insight versus Reaction. So insight, when we look at one of the definitions, it's having intuitive understanding, also the faculty of seeing into inner character or an underlying truth, okay? If you look under psychology, that point B, which I don't have underlined, but it's also the recognition of the source of our emotional difficulty. And it's also the motivational force behind our thoughts, our actions, and our behavior, as well as our self-knowledge. So insight has a much broader definition than at least I thought of when I first started doing this work. Okay. All right, so with that, I'm going to let all of you do a little bit of talking, and we're going to go into our first breakout. So using that definition of emotional intelligence by Salovey and Mayer, the one that I just shared, what I'd like you to talk about is how you currently use emotional information to guide your thinking and behavior. That's the first question. The second one is, are your actions based in insight, or are they insight based? So those are the two prompts. How do you currently use your emotional information to guide your thinking and behavior? And are your actions insight based? Okay. So we'll take about 6 minutes for that breakout discussion. You may want to take a screenshot of this slide, or just write down the prompts. Okay. So how do you currently use your emotional information to guide your thinking and behavior? And are your actions insight based? Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. And Susan, would you like, or I can do the breakouts if you want, or do you have them set up? Okay. Okay, we'll see everyone in 6 minutes.
Start the recording again.
Yeah. All right, I see smiles, so that's good, a good thing. All right, so welcome back, everyone. Did you have a good conversation? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Excellent. All right. Were there any big aha moments that came out of your breakout discussion that you'd like to share?
I don't know so much of it's an aha moment, but it's an aha in the sense that everybody's going through the same thing, right? So
Mhm.
that's nice to hear
Yeah.
at a level, because when you come together and you're like, yeah, we are all doing this. So
Yeah.
that was nice to
Okay.
hear that we're in it together.
Yeah. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a certain commonality around a lot of this discussion or this topic, especially with the dynamics that are going on in the church community now. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to keep sharing. We have more breakouts too, so we'll have a lot more time for discussion. All right. So now let's go a little bit deeper into emotional regulation. Okay. Can you put in the chat just your thoughts around which event you have this person here being chased by a bear, okay, or you have relationship drama? Which of these two events do you think evokes the strongest fight or flight response? Okay. So go ahead and put that in the chat. Which event, the bear attack or the relationship drama, evokes the strongest fight or flight response? Yeah. All right. And then I see Ron put in relationship drama. Okay. Sheila says both. Derek says relationship drama. April, the bear. Yeah. All right. Annetta says both. Maybeth says bear. Donna says relationship drama. Okay. Ron says Ron's not afraid of bears. All right. I love it. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Diana says the bear attack. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I think Sheila, you said both. And Annetta, you said both. And Mike, you said both. Okay. So the people that said both are actually correct. Okay. So, and this is why our brains don't differentiate when it comes to events like this. They don't differentiate between whether we're being attacked physically, like the bear attack, or if there is a relationship issue that's going on. So our brains don't differentiate between the two. So I want to share just a little bit of brain science behind why this works. So when we look at the structure of the brain, and this is very high level, but when we look at the structure of the brain, we have three different areas. There's the reptilian brain, which we also call the autonomic part of the brain. That's the part of our brain that functions whether we're aware of it or not, okay? Some people also call it the lizard brain, but it keeps our lungs breathing, our heart pumping, blood going through our system, and our digestive system working as well. So all at a subconscious level. Then we have another part of the brain, which is called the limbic area or the limbic brain. That part of the brain is responsible for the emotional center, okay? And it also controls the fight or flight response. It also controls the releasing of stress hormones in our body. So it's where our adrenals kick in, cortisol is released into our system, and that little green gland that you see on the left, the amygdala, that particular gland is what actually controls the emotional response. And this part of the brain operates 100 times faster than the third part of the brain, which is the neocortex, or the rational or thinking brain. Okay, so when we're in a situation, whether it's a bear chasing us or some type of emotional drama or stress at work, the limbic area fires off first, okay? And unless we're trained or have really good control over our thinking part of the brain, that part of the brain, the limbic area, can take over and put us into what we call an amygdala hijack or an emotional hijack, okay? So what we're saying is that the brain doesn't differentiate between the two. So I know, for example, when I was at Mass, when Father mentioned that there are going to be some changes coming, I could tell that I got stressed out as well, and my limbic area started to fire. Okay, so again, our brain doesn't differentiate between a physical threat or if it's something more emotional. And the downside of these emotional or amygdala hijacks is that we tend to lose trust in the person that we're arguing with. These events can be devastating and last for years. Just think about, most of you can probably remember if you had a run-in with a teacher or a bully or something like that, even in your childhood, you're still not going to forget those emotional triggers, okay, or emotional hijacks. Now, the part of this that's really important is that these hijack moments all begin with some type of triggering event, okay? And one of the ways that we can stop that amygdala hijack or the triggering event is to use what we call the pause method. So we want to stop and pause and become mindful. Okay? We can also replace mindful with prayerful. Okay? And so when we think about the definition of mindfulness, it really is a practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state, okay, of complete awareness or a heightened level of awareness of your emotions, your perceptions, your thoughts, your experiences on a moment by moment basis. So what that means is just staying present in the moment, okay? And so when we think about mindfulness or becoming more prayerful in general, there's a lot of different ways to do that, okay? And I want to talk a little bit about mindfulness now. And so mindfulness is basically, again, putting space between an event, a triggering event, and your reaction, okay? And there's a couple of truths around mindfulness. Truths. The first one is that it's not exclusive to meditation. A lot of people think mindfulness is the same as meditation, but it really isn't. This tree here, this is called the tree of contemplative practices. And if you look at all the different activities that are here, these are all activities that we can use to become more present and more mindful. So if you look at the left bottom, you can see that it says centering. So I actually practice a form of meditation called centering prayer. But you have, meditation, you have quieting the mind, just silence. You have visualization, lectio divina, also music and singing, contemplative arts, pilgrimage, work and volunteering. There's so many different activities that we can use. Hopefully everyone can see this screen, this part of the screen, okay? But if you can just put in the chat, what type of practice do you have to become more mindful, more contemplative, or just to put space between an event and your reaction? So let's go ahead and share with each other what activities or practices we currently participate in. And if you don't, you can just put nothing at this point. So let's go ahead and put in the chat what activities or contemplative practices we currently participate in. All right. Okay, so Annetta, walking meditation, excellent. April, reflective prayer, journaling, and sitting with the Lord, excellent. Ron, quieting the mind. Debbie, yoga and walking, excellent. Yeah, and Debbie, I remember doing yoga at St. John Vianney, and I kind of wish that would come back. Hey, prayer for Alejandra. Yoga, journaling, walking from Donna. Volunteering with Sheila. Prayer, walking, listening to music with Diana, excellent. And Mike, quietness, deep listening, absolutely. And art, okay. Derek, walking in the park. Maybeth, prayer, yoga, and quiet time, excellent. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, so my particular practice, as I mentioned, is centering prayer. And then also I like to walk and run as well. Okay. All right. So that's the first truth of mindfulness, is that it's not exclusive to meditation. So if you don't have a practice currently, highly encourage you to look at some of these practices as potential ideas. The second truth is that mindfulness is very effective. So when we look at the return on investment of a mindful practice in the workplace, you can see all the benefits, but productivity increases, less sick days are taken, so health improves, accuracy on the job improves, less turnover. And that less turnover is almost at 60%, so it's really valuable. If you're in a sales type role, higher sales volume, and almost 90% lower healthcare cost. So there's a strong reason or strong business case for practicing mindfulness. Okay, so those are the two truths of mindfulness. One, it's not exclusive to meditation, and two, it really works. Okay, so again, really encourage everyone to look at or continue with your contemplative practice. Yeah. All right, now I talked a little bit about when we're hijacked, when we have that emotional or amygdala hijack, that the limbic or the amygdala gland itself releases stress hormones into the body, and specifically cortisol. So I'd like to, in the chat, if you can just put, how long does it take for the chemicals released during a hijack moment to dissipate? Okay. So let's see what people think. How long does it take for the chemicals that are released during a hijack moment to dissipate? Okay. All right, so April says 45 minutes. May Beth says hours. Yeah. Debbie, 20 minutes. Donna says, looks like question mark, wow, an hour. Sheila, 12 hours. Ron says seconds with a question mark. Okay, any other thoughts? Yeah, and Annetta says minutes. All right, and then Diana says the more intense a situation, the longer. And Derek says a half an hour. Okay. All right, so here, Ron and Annetta, you were the closest. Diana, you were somewhat in the right ballpark here. Here is the actual answer. It's actually, science has proven that it only takes 6 seconds for the chemicals released during a hijack moment to actually start to dissipate. Okay. And when I did my emotional intelligence certification work, I actually went through a company called 6 Seconds. And that's why they have the name 6 Seconds, because it only takes 6 seconds of mindfulness, contemplation, putting some space between the event and your reaction for those stress hormones to start to dissipate. Okay. And April, yes, if you are suffering from PTSD, it is a little bit more sustained. However, if you use some type of mindfulness or contemplative practice, which is harder, of course, with PTSD, it still will subside in about 6 seconds. Okay. So again, the training that I went through, or my emotional intelligence certification training, was through this company, 6 Seconds, and that's why they have the name. Okay. All right. So with that little setup, now let's dive into self-management. Okay. And so self-management, when we look at that middle paragraph here, the definition of self-management is our ability to manage our own emotions internally, our impulses and our behaviors, especially when things aren't going the way that we want them to, okay, or when we're stressed out. And then if you look at that last bullet point, this is why it's so critical to really have a plan in place, because there is less than a second between in a stimulus or some type of triggering event and a reaction. So remember, we mentioned that the limbic part of the brain works 100 times faster. From the time that an event goes through your brain stem into your limbic area, it only takes 0.03 seconds for a reaction to occur. And just think about if someone cuts you off on the freeway or does something that triggers you, how quick you react to that. Okay, so it takes 0.03 seconds for your limbic area to kick in, and it takes about 0.08 seconds for the logical part of your brain to kick in if you practice mindfulness or have some type of mindfulness practice. So again, very important to have some type of contemplative or mindfulness practice. Okay. So now let's go through some different insights to help us control these reactions, okay, or to improve our self-management. So insight number one is to know the events that trigger us, okay? So, as an example, Gail, you may get triggered by someone cutting you off on the freeway, okay? That may not bother me, okay? I may get triggered when someone stops at the QFC with their shopping cart, and that may not bother you. So we all have different events or different things that trigger us. So the first thing to know is what your emotional triggers actually are. And most people aren't even aware of that, okay? So let's think about the definition of a trigger to begin with or to start with. A trigger is something that's either done to us or said to us that sets off that process of our limbic area, releasing those hormones or stress hormones inside of our body. Okay, so it all starts with our brain. Okay, and here's the big aha behind that. The triggers are based on what we think we need emotionally to be happy. And happy, we're defining as safe, loved, and secure. Okay, so again, what triggers me may not be what triggers you, because we all have different expectations and different needs about what we think we need to be happy. Okay, so if you look at on the right-hand side, this picture, I like to call that the slap that was heard around the world. All right, and I don't know how many people actually follow this story, but Will Smith, when he slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars last year, was actually triggered by something that Chris Rock said. And now Will Smith's career is basically ruined because of it, okay? And he's banned from the Oscars for 10 years. Okay, and so this is how devastating those triggering events can actually be. Okay, all right, so now we're going to put you back into a another breakout. All of you, hopefully all of you have done your pre-work. If not, take a screenshot of this page here. But what we'd like you to do is talk about what your emotional triggers are that lead to hijack moments. Okay, so the pre-work was to circle your top 3 emotional triggers. So let's have some a discussion around what are your emotional triggers that lead to hijack moments. Okay, and the second part of that is how do these triggers show up in the workplace or in our parish community. Okay, so what are some of your emotional triggers that lead to hijack moments? And how do they show up in the workplace or within our parish? Okay. All right, Susan, let's go ahead and why don't we do 10 minutes for this breakout? Okay. It says 8, but let's go ahead and do 10 minutes and we'll see everyone back in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. All right, did you have good discussion in that breakout room? Excellent. Okay, are there any big ahas that anyone wants to share?
Just that our triggers seem to be similar, right?
Yeah.
Same basic core principle behind the triggers.
Yeah.
I thought an interesting insight, Anderson, was we were kind of finding that the different triggers actually did turn into safety in some way. So just feeling emotionally safe was really important.
Yeah, excellent, April. Yeah, and that is so true. Remember I mentioned earlier that our triggers are based on what we think we need emotionally to be safe and happy. Okay. Yeah, and I know in my case, one of my big triggers is not feeling like I belong. Okay, and that stems from my childhood. And if there's ever a case where I'm not invited to a meeting or I feel like I'm missing out on something, before I started this work, I would get extremely triggered and even act in inappropriate ways in the workplace. And now that I've done this work, I can feel it coming on. So I know how to manage through it better. Yeah, but it really is based on what we think we need to be happy, safe, you know, and again, it stems from our early childhood. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. We're going to keep moving here. All right. Okay. So we covered insight number one. That's knowing your, and I emphasize your, emotional triggers. The next insight is know and use an emotional vocabulary. Okay. And, you know, we don't talk about this enough. I wasn't raised to use an emotional vocabulary. So it kind of came later in life for me. But like Annetta, in your case, you know, with preschoolers or young ones, I would love to see young children use the emotional vocabulary a little bit more often. And the reason we'll get to, but let me give a little bit of background first. So when we think about the difference between emotions and feelings, this is really important to understand that an emotion itself, as it's defined kind of in the EQ world, is that an emotion is a physiological, so think physical, experience that gives you information about the world, okay? But it occurs in your body. So for example, when you're angry, a faster heartbeat or sweaty palms, okay, something like that. So, you know, without emotions, or I'd like to say this, with emotions, it helps us experience the world, okay? Now, a feeling is the conscious awareness of that emotion itself and putting a name behind the emotion, okay? So that's how we describe, at least in the EQ world, the difference between emotions and feelings, okay? So emotion is that physiological or physical experience. A feeling is the conscious awareness of that emotion, okay? Now, when it comes to using or knowing an emotional vocabulary, having an emotional vocabulary really helps you understand yourself and what's going on in the world around you, okay? And it helps you understand what you're feeling when an emotion comes up, okay? And so one of the reasons that it's so important is because when we think about the amygdala and our you know, emotional hijacks, when we attach words to emotions, the amygdala or that limbic activity in the limbic area of the brain actually decreases, okay? And so here's the science behind it. When you're in an emotional hijack moment and your limbic area is all fired up, when you attach a word to what you're actually feeling or experiencing, then you shift that activity into the prefrontal cortex or the logical part of the brain. So you're able to handle stress a lot better and respond logically instead of emotionally, okay? Now, if you attach mindfulness or some type of contemplative practice on top of using an emotional vocabulary, the decreased response in the amygdala actually is enhanced, okay? And this was proven through a series of functional MRI studies that were done at UCLA, okay? So they actually put people through a functional MRI and were able to put them into a stress mode. And then once they attached words to what they were experiencing in the body, the activity in the limbic part of the brain actually decreased, okay? And then it decreases even more if you have a contemplative practice or mindfulness type practice, okay? So that's why an emotional vocabulary is so critical. And it's easy to say, but what we recommend, or what I recommend in the courses that I teach, is just simply to pause, okay? And I like this acronym, or I use this acronym around pause, which is pause, accept what is happening, understand that it's not the end of the world, smile, and enjoy the experience. Okay, so pause, accept, understand, smile, and enjoy. And what happens when you pause, okay, and when you start to attach words to what you're feeling or what you're experiencing emotionally, it shifts or it increases the communication between the limbic area and the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobe. Okay, so that's the science behind why we want to pause and why we want to use an emotional vocabulary. Okay, so again, it's been proven through functional MRI studies. All right, so with the emotional vocabulary, it's one thing to say, I'm angry, okay? It's another thing to say, to quantify or to actually spell out exactly what you're feeling. So we like to use in the EQ world categories of emotions, okay, or feelings. So soft, medium, and intense. So for example, if you're experiencing anger, annoyance would be considered a soft feeling, okay? Rage would be considered intense, okay? So again, there's different categories, so it's not enough just to say I'm angry. It actually works better if you can actually name the intensity or categorize exactly what the emotion is, okay? All right, so now what we'd like you to do is all of you should have received with your pre-work a list of an emotional vocabulary list. So let's look at the right-hand side. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. But let's use anger as an example. So anger would be the emotion, okay? Now, if you look at the feelings that are underneath it, you can see for soft anger, okay, annoyed, bored, crabby, cranky, that would be soft anger, okay? Medium anger would be aggravated, arrogant, indignant, mad. And then intense anger would be aggressive, rage, livid, violence, those kind of things. So when you're actually able to put specific wording and categorize what you're actually experiencing from an emotional standpoint, that's when you can quickly shift that activity from the limbic area to the prefrontal cortex. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go back into our breakouts again. And what I'd like you to do now, we'll take 10 minutes, but use the emotional vocabulary list that was emailed to you as part of our pre-work, and then share with your partners, okay, at least 2 intense and 2 medium feelings you've had in the past week or so, okay? All right, so this is just practice of, naming the feelings that are attached to the emotion. Okay? So use the emotional vocabulary list that was sent out, and then share with your group 2 intense and 2 medium feelings, and maybe a little context behind it that you had in the last week. Okay. All right, so I'll stop sharing. And Susan, if we're ready for the breakouts. Yeah, so I'm in my office now, and I think someone just cranked the heat up to about 80.
Oh, oh no. Are there a lot of people there at this hour?
No. Well, actually, yeah, because we have classes that run until 7:30, the evening classes.
Oh, sure.
So they'll be letting out soon.
Somebody was cold when they came in.
Mhm. This is a good sign too. When people take all the time in the breakouts, you know that they're having good
Yes,
discussions.
absolutely. Here they come.
All right, welcome back, everyone. All right, did you have a good discussion? Okay, all right. Any aha moments coming out of the breakouts that you'd like to share?
I think, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I think what always crystallizes out is the communication part.
Yeah.
We have to listen, we have to hear, and we have to communicate. That's something that all three breakouts kind of, that is what came up.
Yeah. Excellent, Annetta. Yeah, and you know what? That is perfect. And that really is at the core of what this is all about. It is about that communication and the awareness. You know, it is, you know, as I mentioned right before you went into the breakout, when we can attach or communicate our feelings or put words to our emotions, that's when we can actually control that amygdala or emotional hijack. Okay, so it's so important. You know, and this is something, you know, I mentioned before that I actually wasn't raised with. We didn't talk a lot about feelings and emotions when I was growing up. And I kind of wish we had. I think that was, you know, a miss, you know, in terms of my childhood, because I think it would have helped me balance or manage through a lot of stressful situations a little bit better. All right. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to keep going. We're now coming on the tail end of our workshop here. Okay. All right. So as we start to move ahead, one of the questions that keeps coming up when I teach this is, are emotions always right? Okay. So here's a way that we like to answer this, is that emotions, and this is the secret to dealing with really intense, troubling type emotions, is to have that mindset that emotions are always true, okay, about something, okay, but they're not always right, okay? So for example, if someone, and I'll use that same example, cuts me off on the freeway, you know, and in my mind, I think, what a, you know, obnoxious jerk, or what an obnoxious idiot, and I get triggered. It could just be that the person didn't see me or was stressed about something else. So yes, emotions are true. I was triggered, I'm upset, but it doesn't always mean that they're right, okay? And so to help kind of work through all that, that now takes us to insight number 3, and it's using emotional intelligence, or what we call the ECORE model, emotional catch, observe, and release, to guide our thinking and our behavior, okay? All right. All right, so when our emotions are acknowledged, okay, and I call that caught and observed and released, our actions then become insight-based, okay? So remember the definition of insight at the very beginning. We then take a broader view and a more holistic view of our triggering events and our emotions. The other thing is that we think before we act, okay? You could tell I liked to fish when I was younger, so catch, observe, and release. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to walk you through this model. This is something that was custom designed for the course that I teach, the emotional catch, observe, and release model. And I'm going to just give an example to kind of carry you through the entire model. Okay, so the first thing is that there's some type of trigger, we call this the nibble, some type of triggering event that happens. And let's say that it's a peer of ours, okay, who publicly, in a professional way, but publicly points out a mistake in my monthly report, okay? And so let's say that accuracy and perfectionism are trigger areas for me, okay? So you get triggered by that, okay? So a mistake is pointed out in the monthly report. That's the trigger, okay? The very first step is to catch the emotion. So remember, you feel, or your body experiences the emotion first, okay? So it's a physiological or physical reaction that happens. So an emotion is evoked. If you can catch it at that point and feel either your heart rate goes up or your hands, your palms get sweaty, whatever it is that you physically feel when you're triggered, you want to catch it at that point, okay? And so what we say is, and typically most people will add some assumptions or accusations, like that person had it out for me for the beginning, or that person has always wanted my job, okay? So we tend to add an assumption or an accusation. And most people without this type of training will react, okay? Now that we've gone through this training, we want to make sure that we pause, okay? So remember the acronym for pause, okay? So pause, accept, understand, smile, and enjoy. Okay? All right, so ideally we want to pause when an emotion is evoked, okay? The next step is to observe and actually feel the emotion, okay? So pause, feel, from a physical sense, what's going on in your body, whether those are bodily sensations or mental images, okay? So we want to observe and feel the emotion, okay? So now, just to give us some practice on this, let's go ahead and put in the chat, what bodily sensations do you typically experience when a strong emotion is evoked? Okay, I have two examples here, high heart rate and sweaty palms, but there could be a host of them. Your face turns red, blood starts to rush to your head. They can be 101 different things. So for you specifically, what bodily sensations arise when a strong emotion is evoked? And let's go ahead and put that in the chat. All right. Okay. Annetta says tears. Yep. Okay. Debbie, tight chest and blood rush to the brain. Absolutely. Yeah. Alejandra says heat. Ron says twitching and digestive upset. Yeah, absolutely. Don't tell my wife I told you this, but she keeps a bottle of Tums by the bed. She has the same thing, Ron. All right. Maybeth, I hold my breath a lot. Mike, hey, Mike and Laura. All right, Mike says muscles tighten up. Sheila says tight chest. Donna, increased heart rate. Derek shuts down. Mary has stomach issues. Yep. Diana, I can feel my blood pressure rise. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we all have these physical sensations that happen when we're triggered, okay? Again, the secret is if you can catch the physical part first, then pause, you can shift that activity right out of the limbic area into your prefrontal cortex and avoid the hijack moment. Okay. All right, so then obviously, I'm sure most of you kind of caught this. The next step is to name the feeling using the emotional vocabulary, okay? You probably can't see it in my office here, but I actually have a deck of like an emotional vocabulary set of cards. Sometimes if I can't really pinpoint what I'm actually feeling, I'll actually go to those cards and those help me a lot as well. Okay, so what we want to do is name the feeling, okay, put a name to it and note the exact intensity level, okay? So if you feel that like blood rushing to your face, you can say, I'm feeling anger or I'm feeling rage, I'm very upset, and that's a high intensity level. All right, the next step, and this is probably the most important here, is to question the feeling. So there's 5 different steps here. So the first step is to really, I like to journal this, but you can even ask yourself, what is being triggered? What's that unmet need that's leading to that triggering event, okay? Or what that's causing the trigger. So what's being triggered? The second one is to validate the feeling. And one way to do that is just to say, I am, okay? And then feeling whatever it is. If you just start out by saying, I'm angry, that's going to attach you to the feeling itself. But when you just put in the word feeling, it separates you from what you're feeling itself. So you're actually experiencing that feeling as a non-judgmental observer. Okay? And then what in my behavior contributed to this issue? This one takes a lot of courage to do, but it really helps to actually ask yourself, what in my behavior contributed to this issue? And then also to ask, what is the perspective of the other person? So what is the other perspective? And then what boundaries are being violated, both yours and the other person that may have triggered you, okay? If you can actually answer that. In some cases, you may not know, but that's okay. As long as you can put down what boundaries are being violated from your side, that's a good first step. And then actually there's 6 steps. The last one is, what's the learning opportunity, or what should I learn, or what do I think I'm supposed to learn from this experience? Okay. So these are the 5 steps where you question the feeling. Okay. And when you first do this, it's going to take a little bit of time, but as you get more experience, you can actually work through these steps in about a minute or 2. Okay. Then the next and final step of this model is to release the emotion. Okay. So the question you want to ask is, do I understand the complete issue? If the answer is no, go back and rework those steps. The next one is, what actions would an emotionally intelligent person take, if any? So you don't have to take any action, but you do want to ask and inquire about, what should I take if I do take any type of action? And then the third step here is to ask yourself, are my actions or planned actions in alignment with my core values? Okay. If the answer is no, go back and rework that step number 2. Okay. We always want to make sure that our actions and our core values are in alignment so that we're acting from a place of integrity. And then the last question is, do my actions demonstrate a high level of empathy and compassion for all involved? Okay. All right. So, and that's a really important one as well. All right. And so if you're in a rush and you need to kind of work through this quickly, you can always go to that last question. What actions would an emotionally intelligent person take, if any? And do those actions demonstrate a high level of empathy for all? Okay. All right, so now with that being said, I know I kind of walked through these steps and you're just seeing it for the first time. So I want to take you through an example. And this is actually a real example from my life when I worked for Coca-Cola. And all of you have this spreadsheet. So I would encourage you, make copies, print off some extra copies. And the next time that you find yourself triggered, just try working through this process and you'll be surprised at how it works. So hopefully I'm going to increase my screen here, but hopefully everyone can see this. But a little bit of background is, when I was working for Coke, at the end of my career, I had a position where I was actually preparing executive briefings for the CEO of Coca-Cola. Okay. And I felt very honored to be in that position. And I had a new there was a reorg. I had a new manager that came in, and I was no longer, or she actually gave that assignment to someone else on our team that she was mentoring. So now I'll walk through the steps. That's the background. So the specific incident that caused me to get triggered was that my manager canceled the executive briefings. And when I said, hey, I had access to our CEO, the response was, access is a privilege, not a right. Okay. And that really triggered me. All right. And then the emotion that at the time that I caught was a little bit of shame and a little bit of guilt. I thought, what have I done wrong to have that access pulled away from me? The observation, pause and feeling the emotion, I had sweaty palms and blood was actually rushing to my face. And I actually, kind of said something in anger and walked out of her office. And so when I named the feeling, for me, it was shame and guilt, and at a very intense level, and I felt demeaned. That was actually if I attach a word to the emotion, that's what I was feeling, demeaned. Okay. Now, all right, hold on. I need to Make this a little smaller now. All right, now if we go to the right-hand side, hopefully everyone can see this okay. All right, so as I walk through these next steps on the right, okay, so what's being triggered was that, or the unmet need was I have a need to feel heard and valued, okay? So that was the unmet need. I didn't feel safe or that I was heard and valued. And so is the feeling valid? Absolutely. And I said, yes, I am feeling demeaned, okay? And then what in my behavior contributed to this issue? And I put, I own this, but I became visibly upset and left my manager's office in anger. And then the other perspective, as I reflected back and prayed on it, was that my manager wanted her mentee to have exposure to our CEO. And one of the things my manager said is that, hey, there's some gender bias that my mentee has been experiencing. And that's one of the reasons why this was, the executive briefings were given to her. So what boundaries were being violated? Okay. For me, the decision was made without consulting me. And for my manager, it was I challenged her authority. Okay. So both boundaries were being violated. And then what are the learning opportunities? And I'll read this because I know it's probably really small. But for the learning opportunities, I put that I should have asked for the rationale behind the decision up front before getting angry. And then 2, explained why executive briefings were important to my career, okay? The third learning opportunity was that my initial reaction was way too strong. And as I reflected back a little more, I realized that it was actually, or fear was another emotion that I was experiencing, okay? And so to release the emotion, do I understand the complete issue and what is it? I put yes. My manager wants to have more women, or wanted more visibility of female employees in our office. Okay, and for me, I felt threatened and underappreciated. So I'm kind of restating what the triggering event for me. And then what actions would an emotionally intelligent person take? So what I ended up suggesting to my manager was rotating exposure to our senior leaders. So not just one person has access to senior leaders at the company, okay? And then are my actions in alignment with my core values? And I put yes, rotating access to senior leadership is aligned with fairness, which is one of my core values, okay? And then do my actions demonstrate a high level of empathy and compassion for all involved? And I put yes. Both the manager and I felt heard and validated. And at the end of it, access to senior leadership was spread evenly and equally. Okay. So even though this started out as a very intense triggering event for me, it actually ended in a really good place. And again, it's working through the steps in this emotional catch, observe, and release model that really made the difference. Okay. So all of you have this model. I encourage, or have this spreadsheet. I encourage you to use this the next time you're triggered and just see what comes out of it. Okay. And so we're coming to the end here. So what I'd like to just kind of close out with is that, when we think about that definition of insight that I shared earlier at the beginning, sometimes just a moment of insight is worth a life's experience, okay? So having insight is very critical, and it helps us respond, not react, okay? So did we cover our mission today was to define insight, learn a little bit more about mindfulness, learn the importance of an emotional vocabulary, understand the difference between feelings and emotions, and have a process for managing events that are triggering for us. And yes, using our E-Core emotional catch it, observe, and release model. Okay, so we hopefully accomplished our mission today. Okay, and so with that, I would just like to conclude and just say we are the light of the world, and we're a light on Finn Hill. Okay, so with that, we're going to have now move in just to a final discussion, and this will be an open discussion. but I'm going to stop sharing in a second. But I'd like to just open it up to understand or hear from all of you. How can we apply the insights from today to improve our self-management and become a mindful leader and parishioner? Okay. And mindful leader, I define as leading from a position of insight versus reaction, which was the title of the talk today. Okay. So how can we apply the insights from today and improve our self-management and become a more mindful leader and parishioner? Okay. So I'll say thank you and stop sharing and open it up for just an open discussion or some feedback. So thoughts, anyone? We covered a lot, I know, but yeah, what really resonated?
I feel a lot of these are biblical principles, like
Yeah,
keep your thoughts captive, be angry but do not sin, all our phrases in the Bible, I
exactly.
feel like it's really a practice, it's a method to practice that,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. In fact, thank you very much. That is actually, believe it or not, one of the intents behind this work. I don't tell a lot of people this, but when I talk about what I want my legacy to be, it's to show how spirituality and corporate America can coexist. So really a lot of the work that I'm doing is really driven by that mission. Okay, it's to show how spirituality and corporate America could coexist. I'm a little bit limited because I teach at a university and have to kind of balance it out, but you are absolutely right. There are a lot of biblical principles behind this emotional intelligence work. Yeah, thank you. All right, other thoughts, comments? Can anyone see? Yeah, can anyone see themselves using this eCore model? Or the
I
model?
thought there were a lot of really good tools that I could go forward and try and incorporate more. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maybeth. Excellent.
Yeah, I think this is really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Yeah, again, it takes a little bit of practice, but once you get started and get some experience, you can actually work through that eCore model in a matter of minutes.
I'm thinking the sheet on emotional catch, observe, and release, probably a big good sheet to have when we're discussing the reorganization of our archdiocese.
Yeah.
As for each of us to have right there, along with the
Exactly.
vocabulary.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
when you're practicing is one thing, but when you get into the situation,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
there's gonna be a lot
exactly.
of emotions involved with it, I think this is a good thing to have.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Yeah. And that's absolutely right. I mean, we have so much change going on now in the archdiocese. Yeah. Just by having these tools, it will help us manage our emotional reactions to or regulation and reactions to things. Okay. All right. Yeah. Go ahead,
Something
Ron.
that occurs to me is that there are many, ways in which we're not triggered, or in which, others are triggered, in which, we could argue we should be triggered, but we fundamentally do these steps already because we've learned.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we can also just apply areas that we,
Mm-hmm.
are reflective about
Yeah.
and thoughtful about to areas in which we're not, that are weaknesses for us.
Exactly. Amen, Ron. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because chances are probably most of us as adults are using portions of this already. Yeah, and ideally this helps just fill in some of the voids or gaps. Okay. All right. There was let's see. So there was a question from someone asking for my contact information. I'm going to go ahead and just my email address in the chat. And if you have questions on this material, feel free to email me. I put in my work email, so just feel free to contact me. So let me get some feedback. What did you all think about the presentation or the workshop in and of itself? Not so much how you can apply it in your day-to-day life, but just kind of what stood out. What are some of the high points for some of you?
I liked the emotions, sorry. I liked the degrees.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
I thought that was really, oh, maybe that wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yep.
Or, oh, dang, that wasn't so good. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoyed, that was new for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Maybeth. Yeah, and then I see in the chat, someone else said, I like the level degrees of emotions as well, and the breakout discussions. Great. Okay. All right. Okay, well, everyone, thank you for your time. I think we are 7:40. I thought I said 7:30 we'd end up, so we're a little bit over, but it was well worth the time. So thank you all for this opportunity to share this material with all of you.
Thank you
And
very much, Andy.
yeah, thank you. And happy Easter to everyone.
Thank you so much, Andy. We really
Thank you
appreciate
very
your